Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Garbage Time Takes. We are very fortunate, blessed, grateful to have Dennis Weaver back with us yet again for a second
Special
week in a
guest.
row. Special guest Dennis Weaver has joined us. If you
Returning special guest at this
returning,
point.
uh, if you make it 3 weeks in a row, Dennis, we may be able to offer you a full time position on the podcast. Thoughts?
That is wonderful news. I'm really happy to hear that. And that's what we goal that's a goal that we strive for here. And I look forward to achieving that.
Absolutely. And then we also, of course, have Bob with us. We're recording this at 10:37 Mountain Time, 12:37 Eastern Time, and Bob has to be up at 4 a.m. So we're very grateful for Bob's sacrifice on this early morning. Bob, how are we doing?
I mean, I turn on my camera for everybody, but it would just be nothing but pitch black. I'll tell you that much right now. So,
Correct.
uh, we were ready to rally. We're ready to lay down the long arm of the law and have a good pod.
All right. With that being said, we're going to try to keep this one as close to an under hour as possible because as much as we appreciate Bob's sacrifice, we'd prefer he don't have to sacrifice too much. So I thought we would get started. Big news, Dennis, Bob, both of you can join in on this one. The baseball hot stove. Is it fair to say it's on fire? Is it fair to say it's on fire at this point, Dennis?
I would certainly say it's on fire. I mean, it's been cooking.
Absolutely.
Um, we're
Obvious.
cooking with gas this off season.
Yeah.
It's been something.
Obviously, the biggest story: Shohei Ohtani, 10 years, $700 million deferred over an additional 10 years, so he'll make $2 million a year in salary for the 10 years from 2023 to 2033. And then from 2034 to 2043, he'll be making $68 million a year. Um, Dennis, your thoughts on the contract? Thoughts on the way they financially sort of manipulated the luxury tax, and your thoughts on the Dodgers not only getting Shohei, but as we may talk about and touch on a little bit later, Tyler Glasnow and Manuel Margot.
Yeah, no, it's frustrating if you're not a Dodgers fan. There's no doubt about that. It's very frustrating. But if you sit back and you think about it, it's absolutely genius. Um, it's absolutely genius. It's something you can do when you have as deep of pockets as the LA Dodgers do, which is the thing that I find most infuriating. However, this is the exact thing, and I know that there's different rules. You have the luxury tax, there's no salary cap, blah 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 blah. This is what I was calling for with Joe Burrow, and I don't need to get in the big whole debate about it again, but this is infuriating me because obviously players do it. Players can make decisions that are for the betterment of their organization and its ability to win championships, and some players decide to do that and some do not. And it just brought out really my frustration on that side of things. But for Shohei, I think it makes a ton of sense. I mean, I saw that he's still estimating to make like 45 million a year when you account for endorsements and advertisements and everything else, and then throw his $2 million on top of it. So he's going to make more than $45 million a year for the next 20 years. It's just it's genius. It makes total sense for him, and it makes total sense for the Dodgers to save that money against the luxury tax. I think I saw it's like 48. I think counts against the
Six. I
tax.
believe it's 46.
46, given the discounts for having that deferred salary. So and now the Dodgers are going to keep adding. I mean, like you talked about, you mentioned Tyler Glass. Now that came through tonight. Looks like that's going to happen if he agrees to an extension, which he is expected to do. So it, you have to be happy if you're a Dodgers fan. I guess that's all I can say.
Yeah. Bob, thoughts on Shohei Ohtani? And then also on the Dodgers trading away one of your favorite fantasy baseball pitchers, Ryan Pepio, in the deal for Tyler Glasnow.
You know, $700 million is, I mean, a number I never thought I'd see associated with a player in any sport. Um,
I'm sad. I'm sad that the Reds only offered 695 for Dennis's sake. But
695,000.
True.
but I think it's. I mean, I think it's good for the sport that he went to a big market like LA. Um, it is sad because I don't really like the Dodgers, but a sworn enemy of the Yankees. But the fact of the matter is that we're really overlooking the big move that happened in the sport of baseball. Jack Flaherty getting signed by the Tigers, folks. We're back, baby.
Yeah. I mean, before I get into that, Bob, any thoughts on Ryan Pepio being included for Tyler Glasnow?
A throwaway.
Throwaway. Throwaway. Interesting. We'll get to Jack Flaherty in a second. I just wanted to make a point on Shohei Ohtani. Totally agree, Bob. Sucks that he's in LA because I also really don't like LA. But it's good for baseball that he's in a major market. I mean, they may be called the LA Angels of Anaheim, but they were not getting the national media Sunday night baseball games with any sort of regularity. Now you can expect Shohei to be on your TV at least at minimum once a week, if not twice a week moving forward. So we'll see what happens there. But I agree that it's good for baseball that your best player is playing in one of the biggest markets, just as it was Chicago. In terms of his actual deal, I thought there were some really good points made on Twitter. We had some contract analysts get to work. And what's interesting is the reason why it's $46 million against the luxury tax is because that's sort of like the estimated value of the contract when you take into account inflation. So essentially, even though it's a 10-year, $700 million on the deal on the surface, with all the deferred payments and whatnot, and adjusting for inflation and calculating all those types of things, the actual value of his contract is somewhere between $430 million and $460 million over the course of 10 years. So when you think about it, Aaron Judge was what? 9 years 350 360, 10 years 350 360, somewhere around there. So while the 10 years $700 million seems like a huge increase right from the beginning, nearly a 100% increase, if not a 100% increase, it's much closer to a more linear scale where in actuality the value of his contract is really only 80-90 million dollars more than what Aaron Judge is making, which for the caliber of Shohei Ohtani's player makes sense. I just wish I'd be curious to know what the Cubs numbers look like on that, because that seems like a very reasonable deal for Shohei Ohtani. 10 years, $460 million to me anyway seems very reasonable. So a little bit disappointing on that front. Dennis, I don't know if that information was new to you or gives you any, different perspectives on the whole thing.
I was wondering about that actually. So that's helpful to know. Because basically what we're saying, you get to the back end of that contract, that 70 million that he would be making per year is no longer as much uh as much value as it is now.
Correct.
Because we're going to see the price of contracts continue to rise. So that makes total sense. It's interesting that they have a system for calculating that out and making that adjustment. But no, I don't really have anything else I need to say on that.
Dennis, why was Nick Kroll not convincing Bob Castellini to open up the pocketbook for?
That was never going to happen, unfortunately. And I mean,
Maybe if you still had Shogo Akiyama and another Japanese player to pair with Shohei, he might have entertained the offer.
Yeah, and honestly, if we would have kept on to Shogo, maybe that would have been enough to persuade to the great city of Cincinnati. No, it was never going to happen. Not a big enough market, and that's the thing that I love and hate about baseball. Is that you're always going to have this. You're always going to have this, in my opinion. If tradition holds, this skewed towards biggest names going to the largest markets. It happens all the time. But it doesn't mean that the small markets can't win. It doesn't mean that the small markets can't succeed, and it makes it all the much better when you do. Like last year was so incredible even though we didn't actually end up getting into the playoffs for the Cincinnati Reds, just due to all of the young talent and the success that we had. And then you look at like the Arizona Diamondbacks last year. I mean, they didn't have a Shohei Ohtani, they didn't have a Bryce Harper or Juan Soto or Aaron Judge, and yet they were right there in the World Series. So
Correct.
it's I think it's one of the unique things about baseball that makes it so fun is you have these dynamics of the great names, really talented players that draw people into the game like Shohei, but you can still get these underdog stories that you don't necessarily see in some of the other professional sports leagues.
Yeah, saw a lot of meltdowns on X, formerly known as Twitter, about large market teams hoarding all the talent, because you also had Juan Soto go to the Yankees, which was a huge deal. Um, but in actuality, it turns out to not work that way more often than it does work that way. I mean, the Dodgers have what?
Yep.
The COVID championship over the last 10, 15, 20 years? I mean,
Yep.
it's not like they're rolling everyone in the playoffs every year. I mean, they haven't even made the World Series in a couple of years. Same thing with the Yankees. Yankees haven't been relevant in nearly 20 years at this point in terms of World Series competing. So I think it's a little bit overblown. Look at the Padres, who missed the playoffs in its entirety last year after beefing up what everyone thought was just an overloaded, unfair lineup. So baseball's a funny sport. Teams will always find a way to improve, compete, and just because you have a bunch of talent doesn't mean anything. And I'm glad you made a point of that, Dennis.
Right. I couldn't agree more. It's so funny because I always get to this point in the year, and with the hot stove heating up, I fall into it. I'm like, oh, I want Tyler Glass now. I want, I look for the names that I know and that I know are solid guys, and I want the Cincinnati Reds to sign those players. And 9 times out of 10, they don't. But then I'm still sitting there in June, July, and August rooting for, last year, rooting for a competitive baseball team. And they're competing up against the Padres, who have a star studded lineup that they spent a crazy ton of money on. And
So much
so
money that they
just
had to
because you
trade
don't get
away
those
Juan
players,
Soto because the contract was too big for them to pay.
correct, correct. And so, it's sort of one of those things that right now I sit here and, I want to make moves for those big names, but then at some point, maybe it just ends up being a blessing in disguise if you find other ways to compete.
Yeah, I think what the MLB has shown us, at least over the last 10 years that, I can sort of readily recall in my mind, is that championship teams are built through homegrown talent and then adding above average to elite veteran pieces to complement the rest of your core. That's how the Cubs did it. They did it through development and then bringing in guys like John Lester, John Lackey, or Aroldis Chapman. That's how the Astros did it. I mean, the Astros, cheating or not, built their team through their farm system and would bring in guys like Justin Verlander, Garrett Cole to sort of bring the entire thing together. This year's Rangers team, you look at them up and down the lineup. Adolis Garcia, basically homegrown. He was cut by the Cardinals or whatever. Uh, you know, Mitch Garver, sort of just a veteran that's been around the league. Jace Young, you can go pretty much up and down the lineup, and then what they do, added Corey Seager, added Marcus Simeon, and those were the guys that helped put him over the top. So you can go on and on about all the, you know, MLB World Series champions over the years and see how they've built their teams. More often than not, it's not just from hoarding a bunch of star power, and I think you'd agree with me on that, Dennis.
Would completely agree. Before we move on, that prompts a question: is Jamer Candelario average to above average veteran MLB
Oh
player?
my gosh. Oh my gosh.
I think I can give him average. I don't know if I'm
There we
quite
go.
ready.
There we
I don't
go.
know if I'm quite ready to give him above average, but he's been in the league a long time.
Experience.
He's reliable third base, can play him at first base too. I think those are the types of small moves. He's like the Miguel Monteros of the world, the David Rosses of the world. Those key role players that just come in, go to work, put their head down, and can give you consistent at bats. And you need those types of guys in your lineup. So
That's all I'm looking for.
I will
That's all I'm
not
looking for.
disparage Dennis. I will not disparage the Jamer Candelario signing. Probably not the guy that puts you over the top, but he raises the bar. I'll give you that much. He raises the bar.
There we go. I mean, you had to do something in terms of veteran veteran hitter
Definitely.
on the team, um, with enough experience to hopefully do a little bit of leading and just be somebody who, like you said, is a little more reliable. So I definitely don't dislike it as a move. Obviously, there's a lot of talent and a lot of expectation for playing time with the young guys, but I was just curious your thoughts on Jamer as a player. So I that's good to hear.
It's a better signing than Matt Chapman. I can tell you that much. I
There we
can
go.
tell you that much. Bob, swinging it back to you. Jack Flaherty, that's one of the worst contracts I've seen in a long time. 1 year's $14 million for a guy who had a 6+ ERA last year, Bob. Absolutely horrendous. Hopefully you're still alive and with us, but how'd you feel when you saw that come down the pipeline, Bob?
Derek, you know, I felt like one word would describe Jack Flaherty. And to keep it brief, Derek, that word would be washed. And the fact that the Tigers signed him for $14 million, more than the entire payroll of the Cincinnati Reds, tells me that there could be trouble.
Yeah, that I mean maybe with how big Comerica Park is, he can cut down on his tank giving up numbers. But I think me and Dennis can both agree after watching his career with the Cardinals, uh, dude is prone to giving up taters.
That's can confirm. Can confirm.
And I don't think I'd be paying that individual $14 million for a single contract as a sort of prove it deal. But that's just me personally.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of the situation.
Yeah. Dennis, have there been any other massive deals in baseball free agency? I know there's been a couple. The Royals have made a couple moves. I believe they signed Will Smith, so get your bets in now. Will Smith has won 3 straight World Series with 3 different teams. Maybe the Royals World Series champions might be worth putting a future on them. Who knows? But outside of that, I mean, they also signed Chris Stratton, I believe, and there's been a few other names, uh, different sort of low end starters, mid low end relievers that have been signed. But I don't think there's been any other major news other than Jung Hoon Lee going to the San Francisco Giants.
Correct. Yeah. No, I don't think there's been any other major news. As a note of interest, I saw the other day Nick Senzel has signed with the Washington Nationals and is expected to start at third base. I don't know
Okay.
if anybody saw that, but I thought that was interesting after being relieved of his duties in Cincinnati. Um, that was really a disappointing draft pick when everything got settled. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I don't think there was anything else major to this point. I mean, obviously, there's still a lot of
There's names out there.
expectation out there.
The
Yep.
Yamamoto's the next big name, the
Yep.
next Japanese player coming across. Be interested to see where he lands. But Bob, I've got your new
Yes.
favorite. I've got your new favorite player in the MLB, Jung-Hoo Lee, South Korea, playing for the
Let's
Giants
go.
now. I know you're a big fan of the Korean-born athletes.
I am, and welcome to the MLB, good sir. We need you.
Need it badly. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I've got for the MLB. That's the big news that I can think of. So maybe by next week we'll get some movement on guys like Cody Bellinger, on Yamamoto. But really, the free agent pool this year feels rather small in terms of top end names that are available. So be interesting to see how the rest of it plays out. Moving into the NFL, since college football's still on hiatus, the Cincinnati Bengals, Dennis, alive and kicking, beat a good Colts team. Beat a good Colts team. Jake Browning looked pretty good yet again. How are we feeling, Dennis, going into this week's matchup with the Vikings? And I will say this, hand up, I will be picking the Bengals not only out of principle to beat the Vikings, but because I also believe they're the better team, so please do not let me down.
This is it feels to me dangerous. It feels like a dangerous trap game. I hate to say it because I think I completely agree with you. We are the better team. We should win this football game. There's absolutely zero reason we shouldn't. This is a Minnesota Vikings team that put up 3 points last week on the Raiders,
Correct.
and they did it in the fourth quarter. They're going to be starting Nick Mullins at
Correct.
quarterback. They probably won't have Alexander Madison.
Correct.
There is absolutely no reason for the Cincinnati Bengals to lose this football game. However, it's the National Football League. And I can't say more than that. We sat here earlier tonight and watched the Raiders drop 67 or whatever it was on the Los Angeles Chargers. Anything can happen. So I'm not cocky enough to walk into Saturday afternoon expecting a victory wholeheartedly. However, it's one that we are talented enough to get, and just based on the play that Jake Browning has put forth the last couple weeks, I've been impressed enough that I have faith. I have faith in this team to get it done. And, I've been telling people that the thing that impresses me to this point, and it's only been 3 games, and one of them was not good, with Jake Browning, is reflected in the stats that you see on completion percentage, because what he does is make good and relatively quick decisions. Um, his errors are not decision making. Like I'll point last week, the one error that he made was that pick six, that was thrown slightly behind. I can't remember who he was targeting on the play. It was thrown slightly behind the receiver and returned to the house. But it wasn't a bad decision. It was an offline throw. Um, it was quite simply he just did not hit his mark. And 9 times out of 10, being able to make good decisions, tuck it in, pick up 3 or 4 yards if nothing's there, check it down if you need to, but also being willing to take shots down the field when it is there, and do it quickly enough as not take sacks left and right, um, has been very impressive to me anyway. And I think that is a pretty important skill set. I mean, obviously everyone's going to want to compare him to Joe Burrow. I think that actually Joe Burrow does not do that. I think Joe Burrow, in many ways, is actually the opposite of that. I think, yes, is he a good decision maker? For the most part, I think Jake Browning might be a better one. However, Joe Burrow is more talented, and that reflects in his ability to create and make plays, make special plays that Jake Browning could not make. So I'm not going to sit here and say that we paid the wrong guy. I know Bobby's probably going to point that out. But I do have faith in Jake Browning to get the job done, given what he's shown us through 3.5 weeks.
Yeah, Bob, I was going to come straight to you. Sounds like Dennis is admitting that Jake Browning is the real JB.
No,
Well,
I'm saying. Go
he
ahead.
should definitely be doing that. Eating a large dose of crow, as I like to say. Um,
Why am I supposed to be eating the crow? I'm the one that said we shouldn't have gave him the ridiculous contract.
well, you might have said that, Dennis, but you didn't say you shouldn't give him a contract at all, and that's what you should have done with your good friend Jake Browning, manning the helm. Um, you know, I will say I like the Bengals' chances as well. I've got them picked as well. I think that Jake Browning will get it done.
Has to get
Here's
it
the other
done.
thing. Okay.
Has to get it done. Joe Burrow would
Here's
get
the
it
other
done.
thing. If this continues, I mean, hypotheticals here, but if this continues, and I don't know what to some extent, we have to start giving credit at some point to Zach Taylor. Correct?
I'll think about it. I'll think about it. I'm not ready.
I mean,
I'm not ready at this point to give Zach Taylor too much credit for beating the Colts backup without Jonathan Taylor. Not sure I'm ready to give him a ton of credit for beating a Vikings team with a replacement level quarterback. But if it continues through the rest of the season, because there are some big games remaining, I may
week
be
17, Derek. Week 17, Arrowhead Stadium.
I may be forced at that point to give Zach Taylor some credit, but we will see. I won't rule it out, Dennis. I'll give you that much. I will not rule it out.
All
As
right.
this podcast preeminent Bengals hater.
All right. I guess I'll take that. And I mean, I still think he has, even from the perspective of a Bengals fan here, I think that he has things to prove. Back-to-back wins, as impressive as it was on Monday night against Jacksonville, and as more or less dominant as it was last Sunday against Indy. Um, two wins do not solidify your status as a legitimate head coach in the National Football League. However, it's a positive sign, and for me, I'm taking it completely as a positive at this point, and hope it continues.
Bob, I'm going to come back to you one more time before we hit the Lions. How
Right.
close are the Bengals to having a Tommy DeVito Daniel Jones situation on their hands
Mm,
with Jake Browning and Joe Burrow? An overpaid, injury prone quarterback being outperformed by his mediocrely paid backup.
sounds like they'll be moving on with just the overly paid backup or the underpaid backup.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Dennis, your thoughts?
I can't believe we just drew a parallel between Joe Burrow and Daniel Jones. I will not be able to get past that.
I've got narratives to push, Dennis. Got narratives to
I
push.
digress. I digress.
Got narratives to push. No one is safe. Speaking of nobody being safe, Jared Goff is not safe to me, but we're going to start with Bob.
Oh no.
We're going to start with Bob. Bob, Detroit Lions, extremely important game against the Denver Broncos this Saturday.
Yes, it is for us too. But go ahead.
This Saturday against the Denver Broncos, a team that have turned their season around and are playing very sound football. The Lions, on the other hand, playing mediocre football, and Jared Goff, probably the most mediocre of them all. Where's the panic level, Bob? Are we cool as a cucumber? How badly do we need this win with 2 games against Minnesota remaining? And how confident are you in a Lions win and one step closer to clinching the NFC North, as well as one of the 16 different possible scenarios in which the Lions can clinch a playoff berth at minimum?
Thinking about that, it's something where we need all the help we can get, Derek. We don't care. We'll do it ourselves as much as we can, but you know what? Any help that we can get pitched in is icing on the cake, so to speak. You know, I was just looking at the spreadsheets the other day, Derek, of the
Mm-hmm.
records of the records that you don't want to have, Derek. The records that you don't want to have. And I'm seeing the Honolulu Blue on too many of those lists. It's more than time for that to be not the case any further.
Correct.
Um, the fact that Jared Goff would be the quarterback to lead us to that is not lost upon me. After all those years of having Matthew Stafford and then many other quarterbacks, in the meantime, the man that would do it would be one Jared, as Derek calls him, Goof.
Noodle Arm. Don't forget his middle name.
Jared Noodle Arm Goof.
Jared. Oh, I'm sorry. I misspoke. Jared Noodle Arm Negative Athleticism Goof. I should give him his full Christian name.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Um, but here's the thing. First things first, Derek. You got to take care of business. You got to take care of business. We're not leaving any doubt. That's what we're trying to do. We've had a couple of stinker performances, and it's time to right the ship. It's time to win one or two more games and put it out of reach. That's all it takes. That's all it'll take at this point. We're nearing the end of the season. One or two games in the right direction. Excuse me, and we are in the money, so to speak.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. For those of you who are interested in Lions playoff clinching scenarios, not clinching the North, but the playoffs, a Lions win plus Seattle losing and Green Bay losing clinches a playoff berth. the Lions winning plus Seattle and Minnesota losing clinches. And Detroit winning and Seattle losing and the Rams losing also clinches. Those are the three sort of simplest routes. A loss or tie works, but losing is the more realistic scenario. Then you have a couple other things with like Rams, Vikings, Bucks loss, Rams, Falcons, Packers loss, Rams, Vikings, Falcons loss. So there's a lot of teams, but there's a very realistic possibility. If the Lions beat the Broncos, I don't see any reason why the Philadelphia Eagles can't beat the Seahawks and why the Cincinnati Bengals can't beat the Vikings. So we're feeling good. Also, the Cleveland Browns and the Green Bay Packers. I feel like the Browns have a very good chance of winning that football game. So, I'm hoping that there is not a slip up from the Lions again this week. They haven't lost two in a row all year, which is a testament to their ability to bounce back. And that's what I expect. I expect a team that comes out, executes at a high level. You're playing at home, so Jared, noodle arm, negative athleticism goof, doesn't have to worry about the cold, doesn't have to wear gloves, won't have to worry about fumbling a snap under center, hopefully. And I expect him to execute at a high level and rise to the occasion to clinch a playoff berth, gosh dang it. And be one win against the Minnesota Vikings away from clinching the NFC North. And that's the way I look at it, Bob. I assume you agree.
I agree, Derek. And really, for me, it's not about the playoff berth. It's about the North for
It
me,
is about
Derek.
the North. One step at a time, though,
And
Bob. One step at a time.
but you know what? I'll take a playoff berth. I'm never turning that down.
Absolutely. Other than that, that pretty much captures anything I want to say about the NFL. I guess no, I'll get into it in winners and losers. You guys might not have any, but I have a couple. Bob, I'm going to swing it back to you, and Dennis, you might not be able to chime in on the specifics, but you could surely chime in on the generalities. That much I can assure you of. Bob, the Detroit Pistons have finally broken the 20-point loss streak. Um, I'm at a loss for words. At a loss for words. A completely unmitigated disaster. It is not lost upon me that the San Antonio Spurs have lost 17 in a row. That's not lost upon me, but it's not the big story because the Pistons are at 20 plus. Bob, at this point, we've just got to break the record, right? I mean, you've come this far. Just break the record for most losses in a row and call it a day.
That's what I said at last week's pod, Derek, and I'm sticking by it. If we don't get the record, then what are we doing? I mean, this was all just for nothing.
Fair enough. I mean, yesterday, Joel Embiid had a 30-point double-double in the first half, Bob. Um, Isaiah Stewart was ejected on a flagrant 2 foul against Pat Beverly, which was one of the weakest flagrant 2s I've ever seen. They have the 76ers again tomorrow. Then they have the Bucks. Then they have the Hawks. Then they have the Jazz. Then back-to-back games with the Nets. And then the Celtics. Do you see any wins in those next 7 games before the Pistons break the record?
No, I don't, Derek. Not even close.
None even close. Not even close. The record is 28, right? The Wizards did it over like 2 seasons.
I believe so. Yes.
And then the Sixers, I believe, had 24 in one season, right? I think my numbers are right
I
there.
think your counting is right there.
Yeah, and the Pistons currently at 21. So those are the next 7 games. The 8th game, let me look at it quick. The 8th game would be against the Toronto Raptors, who beat us 142 to 113 on November 19th of this year. So
Yeah, we're good.
we're good. Is the record going to be broken?
I mean, I don't know how. I'm not seeing a scenario where it's not at this point.
I mean, Bob, past that, the Jazz again, the Warriors, the Nuggets, the Kings, Can they even beat the Rockets, Bob?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. Outside of that, they might finally, if they don't happen to break their losing streak before then, they have a 3-game set: Spurs, Rockets, Wizards. Surely they have to win one of those. But Bob, I'll leave you with this, and then we can swing it to Dennis. Are the Pistons going to win 10 games this year? Or will they break the Charlotte record of 7 wins in a single season?
You know, here's the thing. I was gonna say that they won't break that record, but the thing is, I think when they win a game, they're gonna win like 3 or 4 in a row, probably. But even then, they're still only at 5 wins.
True.
so,
True.
so, so I can't. I'll have to say no.
I have to say no. Can't say I disagree. Dennis, we're gonna swing it to you. You're not the biggest, NBA guy during the regular season. I imagine, are not watching the Pistons with any regularity, so I won't ask you about any of that. What I will ask you is this: if you were a fan of an NBA team and your team lost 21 games in a row, would you agree with Bob that one, you'd want them to at least break the losing streak record, and two, would you be a proponent of the fire everybody, trade everybody, clean house method?
Oh, excellent question. So my thoughts on this are, eh, I understand Bobby's point absolutely, and I think it has quite a bit of validity. However, I'm trying to relate to the one experience that I have that is kind of close to that, which was the 19 straight loss Cincinnati Reds of a couple of years ago, to open the season 3-22, if you recall that team. And
Vaguely,
I was
vaguely. The Pistons are close to that
I
record, by the way, Dennis.
correct. So that's it's a pretty good correlation. Obviously, you have 162 games versus 81, and each win and loss in baseball is less significant. But the fire everybody, clean house, anger sort of method, it's hard not to feel that way. It really is. I remember feeling that way, and you know, the organization as a whole since that point has actually been able to turn a page, in my opinion, without taking that approach. But I don't blame anybody for wanting to take that approach. I don't know what the record is actually for straight losses in baseball. I don't think we were coming that close to it. I'm sure it's pretty long. I'm sure it's in the 30s. However, if I was approaching a record such as that, if it was truly approaching a record, yeah, why not? Like
23.
I had already declared it's 23.
In the modern 2-league era, the 1961 Phillies lost 23 games in a row.
Oh wow, so we were actually really close. Dang. Um Closer than I thought we were. Yeah, I mean at that point it was comical. The season was over. So, yeah, why not? Go break the record. Then it means something. I completely understand that. I didn't have that mindset with that Reds team, but I didn't realize we were that close to breaking a record. I really didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Bob, I'll swing it back to you just because you and me have been in it with the Pistons. I mean, going back to the CMU days, watching that NBA draft lottery, watching the Pistons get screwed, watching us pass up Tyrese Halliburton for Killian Hayes,
No.
watching us get Cade Cunningham, winning the lottery
Woo.
for once, thinking things were on the up and up. And
Right.
ultimately, Bob, the Pistons have not improved a single iota since we started our journey together back in 2017. Troy Weaver's been there a long time. At one point, Bob, I mean, Monty Williams signed a huge NBA coaching contract. But at
That's
what
right.
point? What point? How much longer of a leash do you give Monty? How much longer of a leash do you give Troy Weaver, Bob?
Well, it just it depends on the locker room. That would be the main concern for me.
Fair point.
Um, does he have control of the locker room? I would guess not after losing 27 in a row. However, um, I am a little bit concerned about the fact that he's also not enthusiastic of the sidelines.
Oh no, do we
Tough to
have
be
Dwayne Casey Jr.?
enthusiastic about what I'm seeing out of the Pistons play, but at the same time, you're the coach. You got to bring the energy. Oh, Derek, it's shambles.
Bob, any thoughts on Troy Weaver? And then we'll get close to wrapping it up here.
You're fired.
Fire Troy Weaver. Bob, I can't say I disagree. It feels like Troy Weaver has done fairly well in the trade department. I mean, he brought us
Right, right,
Jalen Duren, but it feels like any pick he's had to make outside of the top 5, where the pick is sort of made for him at that point, he's kind of blundered it. Like, royally blundered it. I mean, Killian Hayes, 7th overall. You had Tyrese Halliburton right there. Pretty sure that draft class also had Tyrese Maxey. Um, I mean, never forget when we had like 8 centers on the team at one time during the
right,
preseason.
right. And they
Um,
were all ours.
I mean, it feels like, Bob, does it feel like the Pistons don't really have an identity as a team?
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. I would agree. It feels like they're just stuck in neutral, in terms of development, in terms of talent acquisition, and certainly in terms of roster improvement. So I'm with you. I think Troy Weaver. I don't know if I'd be comfortable with Troy Weaver having another draft, Bob. Don't know if I'd be comfortable with it. So we'll see what happens. I think Tom Gores is a lame duck NBA owner. Um, so
I
we'll
would
see.
agree.
We'll see. We'll see what's to come. Last thing, we're at the 42-minute mark, so we're looking good. Last thing, I wanted to briefly cover the college basketball world. Uh, Bob, U of M and MSU combined 9 and 10, I believe. MSU losing to Nebraska, Michigan beating Iowa on the road. Bob, is it time to hit the panic button for the Michigan State Spartans, or does the real Big Ten play not start until after Christmas break? What are you feeling? How are you feeling? Preseason top 5 team, no longer ranked, and really seems to be lacking a center and also their veterans to step up and lead in the production department.
Um, Concerned for sure. I knew the preseason number 5 was. I said this many times on the pod.
You did.
I I said that was a disaster, and that meant that we were going to be nothing but a disaster, and it's played out that way. AJ Hogard has turned into a shell of himself. We're banking on Trey Holloman, who averaged like 1 point last year, to do anything for us. They triple team Tyson Walker because he's the only one that can do anything. We have Matty Sissoko blows,
Correct.
and we need Jackson Kohler back. Thank you.
I think that pretty much sums it up. I don't have anything else to say to that. In terms of Michigan basketball, Juwan Howard, for whatever reason, cannot go a season without getting himself into some controversy. Reported over last weekend, him and our strength and conditioning coach, John Sanderson, got into a verbal altercation. John Sanderson filed a human resources report, complaint, file, whatever you want to call it. I'm pretty much sick of the Juwan Howard experiment. I know we've got some pretty decent talent coming in, but it's one of the most poorly coached Division 1 programs, Power 5 programs that I've seen in a long time. At some point, Juwan's going to be fired, and you're possibly going to lose a couple recruiting classes anyway. So it's not really that big of a deal to me. Personally, just from my own beliefs, I feel like you should be committing to a program and not necessarily the coach to begin with. But ultimately, you have to go where sort of the scheme and the fit of the team works best for you. And if that wouldn't work for the current recruits, then so be it. No hard feelings there. But yeah, Juwan just seemingly cannot control himself. Um, and you don't see any other programs dealing with this type of stuff. You don't hear about other programs having their head coach get into verbal altercations with their strength and conditioning coaches. It just doesn't happen. So I'm fed up. I'm over it. I wanted Juwan fired after last season. He's still here. We're still a dumpster fire. So I could not wait to get. If I had to choose between our strength and conditioning coach and Juwan, I'd choose our strength and conditioning coach, and I'll leave it at that. Dennis, over to you. UC unfortunately fell to Xavier. Unfortunately fell to Xavier in an incredibly important game, but it's only one loss on what has been a very bright and productive season so far. How are we thinking? You got Saturday, you've got Dayton at home, then Merrimack, then Stetson, then Evansville, and you won't get into Big 10 play until January or Big 12 play until January. So how are we feeling at this point in time, Dennis? It was a competitive loss to Xavier.
Yeah, it was a competitive loss to Xavier, 8-1 on the season. I mean, I know it's a lot of um, no name schools, but at least we didn't lose to Colgate this year. There's a win as always. It's it's promising for sure. I mean, you listed the schedule there. I mean, Dayton obviously is formidable in my mind. Usually a very good program. I don't know exactly what they've done this year, but respectable out of the A10. And then you got a few more games there that you'd really like to pick up against Stetson and Merrimack, and hopefully, I mean, you could be heading into Big 12 play at 10, 11, and 1. So it's it's definitely been promising to this point. Um, Things will get awfully interesting once we start playing Kansas and Baylor and TCU and Oklahoma State, but it'll uh it'll shake itself out, and I think Wes Miller has done a fantastic job. I mean, just talking about from a coaching experience, um we're finally in. I think this is year 3 of the Wes Miller experience, and we're finally starting to see some of his guys on the floor. We're starting to see some of the influence of his coaching style, which, man, I mean, all the love in the world to Mick Cronin, not, but
Hep.
it is it is so nice. It is so nice to see a University of Cincinnati team put up points. I know it was against Bryant. I know we scored 93 against Bryant. I know we scored 92 against Georgia Tech or whatever it was. But never ever did I see a Mick Cronin team break 80. Like it was just, and sure, that's a great coaching philosophy. You can win games on defense, but man, is it exciting to watch this team score points. I mean, I'll be honest, the Bryant game on I think that was on Monday night, maybe it was Tuesday night. It was Tuesday night. It was very close. It was like a 5 point game with 8 minutes left, and we took off in the final 8 minutes of that game and ended up blowing them out of the gym. I mean, that is an ability that I've not seen with the UC Bearcats basketball team in a very long time. And so that's what gets me excited about this roster.
Definitely. And then speaking of Mick Cronin, Dennis, Villanova finally bounces back, snaps a 3-game
We
losing
did.
streak, beats UCLA. Uh, Not, the most impressive UCLA team by any means, but it was a win. It was a win against a, Power 5 program. You've got Creighton next Wednesday.
Yeah, open up
Coming
Big East play.
com-
It's
coming off a loss to UNLV, the number 8 Creighton Blue Jays. It's a big one, Dennis. One that you feel like could set the tone for the rest of the season on how competitive Villanova is going to be. Where are your thoughts at on Kyle Midtune?
absolutely. I mean, it is a tone setting game. I mean, you enter into Big East play, and that's when things get real. I mean, yeah, you can lose some of these games that you shouldn't lose early in the season. All's forgiven is if you run through the Big East. And it's not forgiven if you don't. So it's gonna be an important one. Creighton obviously beatable as we saw against UNLV the other night. I've not been impressed with in the little bit that I've been able to watch of this Villanova basketball team. I can tell you, and I watched the UCLA game. That was the most of a Villanova game I got to watch this year. And even in that game, which was a victory against a non-dominant UCLA team, even in that game, we did not play as a basketball team. We played as a bunch of talented individual basketball players. And I think I'm finally coming around to the point that that has to fall on Kyle Neptune. And I sure hope it improves, because if it doesn't, we're going to get slaughtered in the Big East.
Yeah, for sure.
So we'll see how it turns out.
For sure.
There's a lot of talent, and you can see it. I mean, Jordan Longino will pull up and drain threes. Justin Moore can drive to the paint and get baskets. I mean, this team can score. It's just you can tell there's a lack of chemistry. Um, and maybe that'll come with more experience playing together as a unit. I hope so. But if it doesn't, then it's going to have to come back on coaching at the end of the year.
Absolutely. Bob, I want to ask you one more thing before I talk about the last college basketball team that's important to talk about. Your prediction for Saturday's game against the number 6 Baylor Bears for MSU.
A close loss.
Close loss. MSU's been competitive against a lot of the top ranked teams. I think you're probably more right. Then we get to talk about what may be the undisputed best team in the nation. My Arizona Wildcats. The real Wildcats, as I like to call them. Absolutely slaughtered Wisconsin last Saturday. I mean, almost wasn't even really that competitive. And this week, we get Purdue and Indiana on a neutral court. It should be a fun one. I look forward to seeing on how our big guys attack Zach Edey. Look forward to seeing on how our guards match up with their guards. I'm predicting 10-point win. I think Purdue is mid. I think they're overrated. Lost to a Northwestern team that lost to Chicago State last night. Chicago State, who a mere few years ago canceled their season after starting 0-9 due to how dysfunctional their program was. No respect for Purdue. Need a win. Expect a win. Will be unsatisfied with anything but a win. Arizona Wildcats looking like, to me anyway, and I may be biased, hand up, there's some bias in there, but Arizona, unquestionably one of the top teams in the nation. Very excited to seeing how they play, because I can tell even compared to last year. Completely different team, much more focused, locked in defensively. Ball doesn't stick offensively. Extremely excited to see how this season continues to progress. Other than that, we're at the 53-minute mark. We're going to be able to wrap it up here in under an hour as promised. Do you guys have any winners or losers of the week?
I do
I don't
not.
have any winners and losers. Derek, is this where you plan to bring up the Kansas City situation?
It sure is,
Okay.
Dennis. It sure
All right,
is.
then I will balk for now.
My loser of the week is Patrick Mahomes and the
Preach, brother. Preach, brother.
entirety of Kansas City Chiefs Nation. What a bunch of entitled, whiny losers. That was the
There we
first.
go.
That
Thank
was
you.
the first word that came to. Listen, I like Kansas City for the most part. I don't like that they sort of are threatening Tom Brady's Patriots dynasty. But I've never really had a problem with the Kansas City Chiefs. Never had a problem with Patrick Mahomes. Never had a problem with anyone. For Patrick Mahomes to go to the post-game handshake with Josh Allen and complain about the refs and act like the refs lost them the game when Kadarius Toney was very obviously offsides, and regardless of whether it's a call they make often or not, the call was obvious, it was correct, And if that play didn't end in a touchdown, it wouldn't even be a story. So to go into the post-game handshake and just whine and moan and cry to Josh Allen is unbelievable levels of soft that I didn't know Patrick Mahomes had in him. And so I was incredibly disappointed. I guess credit to him for coming back in the press conferences this week and being like, yeah, looking back, that wasn't cool to do to Josh. Got to be a better role model for the players. Despicable. I thought it was entitled. I thought it speaks to the entitlement that the Kansas City Chiefs feel that they're better than everyone else, that they deserve all the success because they're the Chiefs, and it sucked. Really sucked to see because it was an awesome game, and for it to be sort of marred by him being a whiny little loser baby in the post-game handshake, trash, absolute trash. So screw the Chiefs. Uh, I'll let Patrick Mahomes sort of earn my respect back. But that sucked, and it was trash, and I hated it. I hated it. And all the Kansas City fans on social media who are trying to, make excuses and, try and get the Zapruder films, whichever one it is, of Kadarius Toney giving the ref a point and then not even looking at him long enough to get a response. Despicable, trash, excuse-making, whiny loser babies, and all of them. I hope the Chiefs miss the playoffs and they never have any sort of relevant success ever again, and that's my thoughts on it.
That would be incredible. I have so many thoughts. First of all, yes, a little bit of credit to Patrick Mahomes for walking it back. However, it's really easy to walk something back when you're getting absolutely blasted everywhere you look for it. Then you tend to think maybe you were wrong about something. Uh,
It was
couldn't
so
agree more with
soft,
everything else you
Dennis. It
said.
was so soft. It was such a soft loser move to be like, man, I never seen the refs do that. BS, blah, 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 blah. So
Well, you know what
loser.
it is? You know what else it is too, and this is my opinion, is yes, it was about that game and the call, whatever. It was also about the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs are 8-5,
It was a lot of
and that they have
frustration.
not at all faced the amount of success that they anticipated into this year or expected coming into this year. And it was you used the perfect word, entitlement, of coming into this year completely boiling over into this one moment, and the dude just completely lost it. And whiner loser babies, yes, that works. It was just such a bad look, and I hated every moment of it. Um, a- and here's the thing, like, it was such a clear and obvious call. It wasn't even close. Like, the fact that they're not even complaining about the call, they're complaining about the fact
That it
that
was
it usually
called.
gets let go. Um, is
Correct.
also just a loser move because it was the correct call.
And again, it wouldn't
And
have been an issue if it didn't end up in a touchdown and if Travis Kelsey
right,
didn't
it
make a
was
nice
from
play.
before the play. It happens at the very beginning of the play. It happens at the very beginning of the play. And people, I've heard constantly the argument, oh, like, I want the refs out of the game. The refs are always deciding things. This stupid, like, procedural stuff shouldn't matter. Okay, what if he starts lining up 2 yards offsides, 3 yards offsides? I mean, why not? Why not? No order anymore. Just line up wherever you want. I mean, you have to draw a line literally somewhere, and they have. It's called the line of scrimmage, and
Correct.
you learn in first grade how to line up on the correct side of it. And the fact that Kadarius Toney doesn't know how to do that is not the ref's problem. It's not
Correct.
the Buffalo Bills' problem. It's not. It's not even Patrick Mahomes' problem. It's Kadarius Toney's problem, and it's Andy Reid's problem.
Correct.
And the fact that they can't. I've heard, like, no comment on that at all. And sure, it's because Patrick Mahomes has taken the heat onto himself by being such a whiner about it, and that's what everyone's covering, which is fair. But line up on the right side of the ball, man, and you don't have an issue.
Correct.
This can't happen.
Yeah. It's as simple as that. If you knew how to line up properly, you would have never got called for an infraction. Could not have made it any clearer than that, Dennis. I appreciate that. Bob, Any thoughts on your end?
Oh no.
Oh, have we lost him?
Oh no, we've lost him.
We may
This
have
is oh
lost
no.
him. We may have lost him.
Getting no signals in return.
Bob, is there any life? Is there any life?
No life.
We've lost him. Well, I think we'll have to end it there.
Yeah,
Unfortunate.
that's quite the ending.
Yep. We'll try and get Bob's thoughts on it next time. Perhaps he'll be
I'm
able
trying
to.
to think of titles, episode titles as we sit here now. This is
Uh,
asleep at the wheel, maybe. I don't know.
Garbage Time takes episode number whatever we're on. Conversation so boring it puts Bob to sleep. It
Yeah,
could be something to start with, something to think about. But yeah, it appears we've lost Bobby Epler. He's gone comatose. He's done really well this year and sort of trooping it out for the boys and managing to stay
yes,
awake for the whole thing. But you can only do it for so long. Probably just ate it as soon as he said the thing about the Baylor MSU game, and has been out cold ever since. If I had to guess, but um, yeah, I'm glad you're right there with me in how pathetic it was, Dennis, because
yeah.
it was pathetic and entitled.
I'm very glad that you're right there with me too. It was yeah. I mean, a lot of frustration about the season, but just it was gross to watch.
Yeah,
It was gross and pathetic to watch.
yeah, and again, I said it twice. I'll say it one last time, and then we can move on. If that play didn't end in a touchdown, wouldn't have even been a story. Wouldn't have even been a story. It would have just been another play. But yeah, that'll. I don't really have a winner for this week. I guess the Dodgers for signing Shohei Ohtani. We can leave it at
Yeah.
that. I will briefly just pull up the Garbage Time Takes Your Money results from last week, um, just to have that. Give me one
Okay.
second. So last week we had Chargers Broncos. The Chargers were favored by 2.5. The over under was 44.5. The Broncos, I believe, won outright. Correct? Yes, they did. 24-7.
Yeah, it's like
24-7. So the under hit. The Broncos covered and won outright, which means all three of us, we took the Broncos and the under. All three of us go 2 for 2. So credit to us for last week being on the Broncos. Probably didn't help the Chargers that Justin Herbert's done for the year. That's something we didn't really get a chance to touch on, which is
correct.
fine. The Chargers are broken. Got absolutely blown out by the Raiders tonight. I think we're all in agreement here, and we can speak for the comatose Bobby Epler, that Brandon Staley probably shouldn't be allowed back into the building in
Correct.
preparation for next week. I think that's fair to say. But yeah, that'll wrap it up for this week's episode. Dennis, since Bob is out of commission, do you want to hit the socials?
I think I am next man on deck for that kind of thing. We've got garbage time takes on YouTube, garbage time takes on Instagram, and garb time takes on Twitter/X, your favorite social media platform. So follow us, give us a like. Um, yeah, I think that's all. I think that I was trying to
Yep,
pull my best Bobby there. I think that's pretty much everything.
yep, yeah. Absolutely nailed it. Couldn't have said it better myself. Like, comment, subscribe on the YouTube, hit the notification bell so you can be notified when we upload the next podcast. Other than that, thanks so much for watching. We will see you next week as we go just over the 1 hour mark for this week. And without further ado, in 3,
Two, one,
peace.
peace.